pitching your music to radio, a relevant and important way to have your music heard, yes, even in 2023. KWSS Independent Radio has been on the air since 2005 and in 2022 opened a second tower in the East Valley at 99.5 FM. Now it can be heard all throughout Phoenix on 93.9 and 99.5. KWSS is 100% independent, locally owned, a 501c3 nonprofit supporting arts, entertainment, and small business in Phoenix. Everyone involved with the station volunteers their time. Our passion for music and community is what keeps us going. However, since we do have bills to pay, we hold a few fundraisers each year to raise money to keep the lights on and the music going. For as long as I can remember, I have always wanted to do things that have helped the most people. It was always about community. Oddly enough, podcasting got me into radio. I had a current events podcast and I pitched it to an indie station here in Mesa that is no longer around, and they didn't want a talk show at that time, but they did like my voice. Boom, I was in radio doing voice tracking. When that station merged with KWSS in 2007, I started on middays, which included the lunch hour retro show Dani's Diner, and for the last 5 years until 2023, I have hosted the morning show during the week. I was also promotions, marketing manager, and co-programming director at the station. I also have a digital marketing business that I've owned since 2012. I was headed A&R for the recording artist. And the bottom line is, I believe everyone deserves to have their music heard. When I did this presentation at the Mesa Music Festival in April of 2023, I asked everybody how many people think radio is dead, and several hands did go up, and no, it did not hurt my feelings, but I wanted to show people some reasons why radio is still very important. There are 15,000 radio stations in the United States, and 93% of adults are listening to radio. They mostly listen in the car. And remember, not everyone has a newer car with access to streaming, even though there are definitely workarounds. I also just recently read a survey from DTS.com. They surveyed about 3,000 car owners, and 72% listen to over-the-air radio, 24% listen to satellite, and 14% use Apple CarPlay. Now, when your music is played on the radio, it is exposed to a large number of potential listeners locally and nationally, and it has a large reach across all generations, with the highest reach being Gen X and then millennials. Some other reasons that it is important is a shared experience. When you listen to a radio station, you are part of a community of listeners who are all tuned in and experiencing the same thing. And it is still seen as a credible source of music discovery by many people. Radio is also more engaging because you have your hosts or DJs who know the music that they are playing, and they are right there with you listening and introducing you to new music that you might not find on your own. Now, all of that being said about why radio is important, streaming is also very important. Being added to playlists helps a musician greatly. It's just another way for people to discover your music. It increases your reach and potential ears. You can also earn money. While the amount of money that being a musician earns from streaming may not be as much as they would earn from selling physical copies of their music or merch, it is still considered an additional source of income for many musicians. And you can directly connect with your fans and listeners. You can directly link to your music as well and put that link on other places like social media. There are challenges to both radio and streaming. With streaming, you have to actively and constantly promote your music to be heard. And with radio, you have to actively and constantly pitch to stations to have your music played. The bottom line, though, to both is promotion. Here are some tips to make your pitch to radio. Some of this is going to seem very standard, but you would be surprised at some of the pitches that radio stations receive. 1, do your research on radio stations. Before you start randomly emailing every station you found in a Google search, take some time to research the stations that you might be interested in. What kind of music do they play? Who are their listeners? Probably most important, will they play your music? Some stations are genre specific, or they play very little from indie bands. Even so, they might have a specialty show where your music could fit. Once you have a good understanding of the station's format and audience, you can tailor your pitch accordingly. Now, a side note to that, do not write off independent non-commercial stations. They might have a smaller reach, but they can potentially reach thousands of listeners and they have more freedom to play independent artists. They also have a listener base that is very loyal and trusts their DJs. It's quality over quantity. 2, have a CV or a press release. Your pitch should be well written and professional. Be sure to include all relevant information, especially if it's about a song, such as the name of the song, the genre, and the length. You should also include a link to download your song. If the release is part of an event, it is super important to have that date included. And a side note to that, do not send your music the week of a release and expect radio play. 3, send a link to download a radio-ready single. Now, when you send that download link, make sure it is labeled properly with the artist name and the title of the song. So many files say a partial song name or final version.final.final or something along those lines. Please make sure to have a radio-friendly version of your song. Sometimes DJs will do some edits, but if it takes a lot of editing, they're not going to play it. Nobody has time to work on it themselves. And yes, it does need to be radio friendly for independent stations as well. If they are on the FM, then the FCC is there and you can't say fuck on the air and you can't sing it. Make sure there is an MP3 version available. Most radio stations still need an MP3 to upload in their programs. The more options that stations can get from clicking one link, the better. And do not just send a Spotify or YouTube link. Stations cannot do anything with that. 4, relationships matter. It takes time and effort to build relationships with people. If you have done your research on stations, you will learn how they interact with musicians in their community and how you can get involved. If you see them at a show, say hi. If they have a remote at a music festival or you see their tent somewhere, stop by and introduce yourself. If the station isn't in your area, interact on social media and find ways to build those relationships online. 5, be patient, be persistent, but do not be overwhelming. Don't expect to get your song played on the radio overnight. It may take several weeks or even months before you hear back from a station. This is why it's important to have any relevant dates sent with your music and that you send it far enough in advance. Set reminders to follow up. A polite email or even a quick message on social after a week or two, depending on your timeline, so you can check in and see if they've had a chance to listen to your song. If you don't hear back right away, it does not mean you're being ignored. I once had an artist angry at me because I never responded to their email. What I discovered is that they sent one email that I completely forgot about because it became buried in 100 other emails. I only found out through someone else telling me that they were offended that I never responded. This is why you have to follow up and always, always, always be kind. 6, ask for feedback. If a radio station does listen to your song and they're not interested in playing it, it's okay to ask them why. Ask them what they didn't like about the song and see if you can use it to find somewhere to improve. It also could just be the wrong genre or just not for their station format, and that's also important to find out. I know this is a hard pill to swallow, but you can always improve and not everyone is going to like your music. It's just a fact. Sorry. And 7, don't give up. And I can't say it enough. Be kind, be professional, even if your music doesn't get played. It will be frustrating at times, but it is not impossible. If you're persistent and you follow some of these tips, you'll be seen and eventually you will be heard. If you want to learn more or have any questions about anything, you can find KWSS Radio at kwss.org. You can learn more about me at danicutler.com. Find both things all over social media, and you can also shoot me an email, dcutler@danicutler.com. Thanks for listening.